Hello, this is Christina Wallace, and today I'm going to show you how to make this cornflower. As you can see, it's nice and blue in color. However, that is not how I was planning it. What I was trying to do was to mix some custom colors to make it look really dramatic and yet really natural. So with that in mind, last week I was running an experiment on how to mix colors. Thank you to everyone who turned up to watch it. And I did get some nice colors. However, I didn't think I was becoming equipped to mix the same color over and over again. One of you left a message under that video saying that perhaps I should try to take a color mixing course. Now, up to that point, I had no idea that such thing even existed. But now that I knew, there was only one thing to do: go to Skillshare. So I went and had a look at Skillshare, and sure enough, never mind this being such an unusual course, there was not one of color mixing courses there, but a whole dozen of them. For those of you not yet familiar with the Skillshare, Skillshare is an online learning community with over 25,000 video courses of every style and description, and it has over 7 million users worldwide already. It also has to be added that at less than $10 a month as per annual subscription, it offers a great value for money. Maybe like myself, you would like to learn more about color mixing so that you could take charge of what exactly color your flowers are going to end up being. Or maybe you want to take a course in still life photography so that you could take better pictures of those flowers that you make. Maybe you are interested in learning in general for career or other hobby purposes, or perhaps you're just a curious person. If you feel that any of the above applies to you, I would encourage you to go to the description right below this video and find Skillshare's link right at the very top of it. This link would allow the first 500 people to press it to utilize on their generous offer of 2 free months trial right now. So back to our cornflower. As usual, you would be able to find the toolbox information in the description, and I do my best to draw your attention to any unusual materials that I will be using or tools. For this one, you would benefit from having a metal stick, but if you don't have it, find something to replace it in your household goods perhaps. And here, as I wasn't mixing the mix that I wanted to mix, I ended up making kind of different density blues for my little petals to go on the side of a cornflower. As you can see, the one on the right is lighter. Don't worry, as we go along, it would all make sense. I apply petal base to my green board before cutting out such small delicate shapes. It's a bit of fluff got stuck to it. It does stick, you know, all the fluff and all the rest of it does stick to my cold porcelain as well. It's just my camera doesn't always pick it up. So no, I don't have a magic formula for dedusting my clay or my gum paste, unfortunately. So this is a template which I've just cut out over the top of my head. Might not even be the best at all, in fact, but you're welcome to put a piece of paper over a screen and just overline it and copy it, or just do your own, or there might be quite a few of those online already that you could overline and copy. But since I improvise and make most of my flowers that I present on this YouTube for the first time, that normally saves me time on research and so on, just to cut it out. So yeah, you're more than welcome to copy it. And here, the shape I found is a bit awkward, and it does actually cause a lot of waste of clay. But don't cut it too thin. So here at the bottom, closer to me, the layer closer to me is a little bit thicker, and then it goes a little thinner, which is why I cut the clay in two. Sorry to run behind with this commentary. And yeah, needle just helps me to cut out more delicate shapes more precisely. Again, as I've mentioned before, I find it quite a bit easier and quicker to thin the small details on my palm, but if it gets bigger, then it always goes in that sleeve underneath. And yeah, and so this is the base for the little petals, and now I'm going to choose, this is just a random veiner, and I've chosen it to vein my petal. It's not specifically for it, but since it's such a small part, I think it would work quite well. Now, it took some fiddling for me to kind of figure out how to fold it nicely. So yeah, this is definitely a time-consuming and fiddly element, and it makes things difficult as well, that this clay, by the time I've rolled it out and thinned it and then veined it, it's dried quite a bit. So if it refuses to stick together as you force this ends together, you might want to add a touch of water. So yeah, so the idea is that you gather up the top over something, or maybe just gather it up and then you squish it in, and then you do your best for this whole seam to just disappear by pressing it over. So you don't want this cutout to be too thin, because if it's way too thin, it's not going to vein well. This is water I'm using, by the way. So yeah, it's not going to vein well, and then it's not going to stick well. So it's that usual eternal balance of thickness and maneuverability. I can't pronounce this word, but basically being able to make best of it, to vein it and to put it in shape. Not so much with gum paste, but with cold porcelain, it's a very characteristic feature to balance the thickness of your clay and being able to shape it. And so here, more or less, it kind of worked. It's I just had to wait until I get a lucky flower to kind of demo it, because a few of them were quite wonky. And again, if you want them all perfect and seamless, and the more seamless it is, the better for dusting later, as you'd be able to see, then the more practice you would need to put on it. This is an amazingly fiddly flower, not difficult to make, but very fiddly. So as you could see, I tried to shape it now. Again, backpedaling with my comments, but yeah, I try to be quite casual with shaping this, with curling these little elements of this flower, so that it doesn't look uniform across all the little flowers. And here's my wire. It goes in. Again, it could be quite tricky because the clay would already be quite dry, unless you work really fast. But these days I think I work reasonably fast, not terribly fast, but much faster than I used to anyhow, and I still find that the ends of this are quite dry, you know, at the very bottom of this flower. So I would need to cut it off perhaps, or no, I decided to glue it to the wire so it doesn't stick out. Try to make the ending as neat as possible, so then they don't interfere when I assemble the flower. So the smoother the finishing is all around the outside of the flower, the easier it would be to tone it nicely at the end. And if you have creases, or the more creases you have, the less natural the toning will be. Once the glue sets, you don't actually need this little hook, so that's overdoing it perhaps. And yeah, and this is a selection of metal sticks that are very handy for small flowers when you work with cold porcelain, if not large ones. If you're not one of my students, you can get them from Etsy. So here I am going to refresh my cold porcelain, because I'm trying to reuse most of cold porcelain when I work with it, because it's quite expensive and I work with branded cold porcelain these days. and so to condition it I add a touch of water and then a touch of Nivea cream. And yeah, there's a pre-prepared stamens. Ideally I like to make my own stamens, however for something like this they are absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I've just dyed my yellow stamens to be black, but you can buy them again. These are the sorts of stamens you get from Etsy. In fact, I'm pretty sure I got mine from Etsy and I paid about £7 for millions, gazillions of them, which I still have loads sitting around, and as you can imagine they don't go off. Now here I'm going to make little middles for my cornflower, little strands in the middle, whatever they're called. They're probably, oh, I don't care really, but yeah, this is my way of folding it. For this your clay needs to be quite fresh, so recondition it if necessary, and if you know a quicker and nicer way of rolling them in some identical teeny weeny little shapes, by all means use your way. And also if you think that I talk too much and it's distracting, please leave a message. If it's only 1 or 2 messages then I'll just ignore it, but if it's like 10 then I will stop talking, shut up and put the music on. And so again, the softer and fresher your cold porcelain clay is at this point, the easier it would be to thread it through, or rather thread this wire through it. So don't leave it sitting around too long, perhaps work in threes. So here I take those stamens that I've cut off just under where the hard bit begins, so it goes in easily. Sorry, this bit is out of shot, but all you do is you insert your stamen inside the glue, and yeah, and jobs are good. And try to keep your stamen as straight as possible as well, to gain some kind of a uniformity from one of these pieces to another, really across all of them. And now I'm just going to add little flowers to go on outside of those. So this is kind of medium thickness. Make sure that you put petal base, or maybe just dust the cutter well so nothing sticks unnecessarily. You could use independent pieces of clay, just like a piece of rolled out clay per each, but I found that that was quicker. And so yes, I've left it for 10 minutes just to kind of stop falling apart and stop the needle to go through it. I don't know if you worked with this cutter before. It is quite a fiddly small cutter. So if you're using slightly different cutter for these little flowers, then be sure to match the size of your ball to the petals that come out of your cutter. I think for the purpose of this tutorial and this flower, I think slightly bigger cutter would do. Huge cutter really won't, not for this look anyway. So I found that it's easier to make a hole before threading the flower through, because a wire 35 is not a very firm wire to make a hole all by itself. And here I'm making an umbrella hook, my favorite umbrella hook, as a base for this cornflower. Cornflower is a very light flower, so you don't necessarily need gauge 18 wire here. 20 or 22 would be plenty, 20 I think, but I didn't have any gauge 20 flower. And I have a separate video on how to make a hook, but I think this one probably would be enough. I will leave the other one, I'll link it up in the description. And of course, this is a very, very common way to present a middle of the flower. Second common after the ball, so it kind of just sits on the top. And I've done it in quite a number of flowers before, but anyway, if you're new to my channel and you've not seen a center like this done, or at least not by me, here we go. You could do all sorts. You can do daisy, you could do, as I've done, gerbera recently, using the same principle. And here I am just going to section it. And what I'm doing is I'm going across and then across again and so on. I kind of refer to it as pizza style sectioning. Another one that has those is poppy. Poppy flower has kind of pizza style sectioning in the middle, I think. Well, loads of them do. Loads of them do. As I always say, you don't have to go into the whole lengths of this detailed flower, especially if it's your first time making cornflower. You could try to simplify the middle by just leaving it round and giving it a bit of dust, or you could cover the middle altogether with something. So just take it as far as you want to take it, because you want to strike a balance of not getting too fed up with all this hours it takes you to make one little flower, and still making it and enjoying it, and then making more and more, and then making it your own. So here I'm using my edible dust. Well, not all of them are edible, but they are from Edible Art, as you could see in the background, and they're lovely and vibrant. There's sugar art there as well, and they're such lovely vibrant colors that I have no problem using them. One problem that could arise, seeing that we're working in cold porcelain, is that they could fade over time. I haven't been doing cold porcelain for long enough to notice them fading, in all fairness. And here my center is reliably enough dried not to pop out, but I could manipulate its shape a little bit, and you will see what I mean in a bit. So again, using just some bright pink paint, I add a little bit of a contrast, a little bit of an accent to my flowers. For all of this, you would need to either dry it or fixate it, or both, to avoid colors, even minute amount of color smudging itself on some other flowers or on your hands or whatever. Basically, be mindful of that. And now we're doing something that is called dry brushing. So adding a little bit of paint and then just spreading it around evenly. And normally it's done with a brush or what have you, but because these little blooms are so small, I'm just using my fingers, and they would just wash off with soapy water, so it's a no-brainer really. And inside as well. And you would find that because my little blooms were different colors, some were lighter, some were darker, the finish is also going to look slightly different. And you can play with that further by maybe changing colors or whatever. I've just used the same color throughout. So now we're ready for the glorious assembly. I'm afraid I couldn't really find a way to cut this video down anyhow, so I am gonna have to leave it for a part 2. I do apologize. This is what I mean about wanting to learn to mix colors. Yes, you could do a nice job, but you could always do better. And yes, there are lessons and workshops that you could pay for and go, but chances are if you could afford them, having worked all week, you wouldn't want to do them. And you know, indirect courses like this, they're amazing. They give you the knowledge not to invent the bicycle all over again, and yet they leave you the space to express yourself in your own way, to be totally original and totally, you know, to have fun with it. Yeah, I leave you with that thought. I'm planning to load up a second part on, bank holiday Monday. So there won't be a large gap. I just couldn't get it all in one. And I'll see you very soon. Have a lovely weekend.